Welcome to Black Power Stories, where every story reminds us that true justice always finds its way. If you believe everyone deserves dignity, fairness, and respect, you're in the right place. Tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another powerful story. Your badge did not protect you today. It exposed you. Those were the first words Officer Ryan Whitmore heard before his entire world began to change. The voice on the phone was calm, controlled, and unmistakable. It belonged to Governor Daniel Reeves, the highest authority in the state, and the message carried a weight that Ryan had never expected to feel. But 24 hours earlier, Ryan believed he was the one in control. He believed he understood every person who walked into his city, every situation he encountered, and every decision he made. He believed a uniform was enough to separate right from wrong. He was wrong. The story began inside a small neighborhood diner on a quiet Tuesday morning, the kind of place where the smell of fresh coffee filled the air and regular customers knew each other's names. Sunlight passed through the front windows, touching old wooden tables and creating a peaceful atmosphere that made people forget the noise of the outside world. Sitting near the corner window was a woman named Olivia Carter. She wore a simple navy blazer, carried a small notebook, and enjoyed a few quiet moments before a busy day ahead. To everyone around her, she looked like any other customer stopping by for breakfast. Nobody knew that Olivia was a United States Senator. Nobody knew that she had spent years building a reputation based on patience, leadership, and service. She did not arrive with a large group. She did not demand attention. She simply wanted to listen, observe, and understand the everyday experiences of the people she represented. But sometimes, the people who hold the most power are the ones who choose to stand quietly among everyone else. Across the diner, the front door opened, and Officer Ryan Whitmore stepped inside. His uniform was polished, his posture confident, and his expression carried the certainty of someone who was used to being obeyed. For years, Ryan had walked through the city believing he could read people within seconds. A person's clothes, their appearance, their background. He thought those things told him everything he needed to know. But those assumptions had created blind spots he never wanted to acknowledge. As Ryan looked around the diner, his eyes stopped on Olivia. He did not see a senator. He did not see a public servant. He saw only what his own assumptions allowed him to see. The room continued moving around them. Coffee cups touched tables. Conversations continued. But something invisible had changed. Olivia noticed the officer's attention, yet she remained calm. She had faced difficult moments before. She had learned that dignity was not something another person could take away. It was something you carried with you. Ryan walked closer, unaware that the woman sitting in front of him was connected to decisions that affected leaders across the state. He was unaware that a single encounter inside a small diner would soon reach the governor's office. He was unaware that the person he underestimated was about to reveal a truth that would force everyone watching to question what justice really meant. Because sometimes, the person everyone overlooks is the very person who changes everything. Olivia Carter had learned a long time ago that the most important conversations rarely happened in government buildings. They happened in places where people felt comfortable enough to speak honestly, where stories were shared over coffee, where ordinary moments revealed extraordinary truths. That was why she often stepped away from the spotlight. Without cameras, without announcements, without a crowd reminding everyone who she was. She wanted to hear people as they were, not as they acted when they knew a senator was listening. The small diner on Maple Avenue was one of those places. For years, the diner had been a gathering spot for teachers, workers, retirees, and families starting their mornings. The walls carried years of memories, from birthday celebrations to quiet conversations between neighbors. Olivia liked that about the place. It felt real. It felt human. As she looked down at the notes in her small notebook, she wrote about the conversations she had heard that week. Rising concerns about community trust. Questions about fairness. The feeling some residents had that their voices disappeared before reaching the people who made decisions. These were not just numbers on a report. They were real experiences from real people. And Olivia believed leadership started with listening. She had spent most of her career proving that respect was not something given only to those with influence. It was something every person deserved. But she also knew that being a Black woman in positions of authority came with challenges many people never saw. She remembered the moments when people underestimated her before hearing her ideas. The moments when some people focused on her appearance before recognizing her accomplishments. Yet she never allowed those moments to define her. She carried herself with quiet confidence because she knew exactly who she was. Outside the diner, the city continued moving. Cars passed along the street. People hurried toward work. The morning routine continued without anyone realizing that a simple breakfast was about to become a moment that would reveal something much deeper about the way people see each other. Inside, Ryan Whitmore stood near the entrance, scanning the room. He had built his identity around being certain. In his mind, uncertainty was weakness. Questions were challenges. And admitting that he might be wrong was something he rarely considered. Ryan had spent years wearing the same uniform, and over time, he had started believing the badge represented more than authority. He believed it represented judgment. He believed he could quickly understand situations before hearing the full story. That confidence had helped him move through his career, but it had also created a dangerous habit. He stopped looking for the truth and started looking for confirmation of what he already believed. At the corner table, Olivia noticed him approaching. She closed her notebook and placed it beside her coffee. She did not know exactly what was about to happen, but she recognized the expression on his face. It was the expression of someone who had already reached a conclusion before asking a question. The distance between them became smaller with every step Ryan took. Around the diner, conversations slowly faded as a few customers noticed the interaction beginning. No one knew Olivia's position. No one knew the years of service behind her calm expression. They only saw a woman sitting quietly and an officer approaching with confidence. But the truth had a way of waiting patiently. And on that morning, inside a small diner filled with ordinary people, the truth was about to reveal itself in a way nobody expected. Ryan Whitmore stopped beside Olivia Carter's table, his presence changing the atmosphere around him without him saying a single word. The quiet rhythm of the diner began to slow. A waitress carrying a fresh cup of coffee paused for a moment. A few customers looked up from their conversations. They could sense the tension, even though they did not know where it came from. Ryan placed one hand near his belt and looked at Olivia with the confidence of someone who believed the situation was already decided. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, his voice firm. "I need to ask you a few questions." Olivia looked up calmly. She noticed the tone before she noticed the words. There was no greeting between equals. There was an assumption. "Of course, officer," she replied. "May I ask what this is regarding?" It was a simple question. A reasonable question. But Ryan seemed to interpret it differently. He glanced around the diner, then back at her. "I asked you a question. I expect cooperation." Olivia remained composed. She had spent years in meetings where people tried to test her patience, challenge her authority, or see if she would react emotionally. She had learned that sometimes the strongest response was not a louder voice. It was staying calm when someone else expected you to lose control. "I am willing to cooperate," she said. "I would just like to understand why I am being questioned." For a brief moment, Ryan did not answer. He seemed uncomfortable with the fact that she was not intimidated. He was used to people immediately changing their tone when they saw the uniform. But Olivia did not change. She did not raise her voice. She did not argue. She simply waited. That silence bothered him more than an argument would have. "There was a report in this area," Ryan finally said. "I am looking into it." Olivia nodded slowly. "I understand. Then I am sure you are also looking for facts before making assumptions." The words were respectful, but they carried meaning. Several people nearby noticed the difference between them. One person quietly looked away. Another exchanged a concerned glance with the person sitting across from them. Everyone in the diner could feel that something was wrong, but most people did not know how to respond. Ryan looked at Olivia's notebook on the table. "What are you writing?" he asked. Olivia closed it gently. "Personal notes." "About what?" he asked. "My work." Ryan studied her for another moment. He did not know that the notebook contained observations about communities across the state. He did not know that the woman sitting in front of him had spent years meeting people from every background and listening to their concerns. He only saw a situation that fit the story he had already created in his mind. Olivia looked directly at him. "Officer Whitmore, I hope you understand something. Respect works both ways." The sentence was quiet. It was not a challenge. It was not an insult. It was simply the truth. But Ryan was not prepared to hear it. He had spent so long believing that authority meant control that he forgot something important. Real authority did not need to prove itself. Around them, the diner became almost completely silent. The morning that started with coffee and conversation had turned into a moment where every person in the room was watching. They did not know Olivia's secret. They did not know her title. They did not know what was coming next. But they were about to witness a moment that would reveal the difference between having power and understanding responsibility. The silence inside the diner lasted only a few seconds, but it felt much longer. Every person nearby could sense that something important was happening. Olivia Carter remained seated, her hands resting calmly beside her coffee cup, while Officer Ryan Whitmore stood across from her waiting for a reaction he expected to see. He expected frustration. He expected fear. He expected someone who would immediately explain themselves. But Olivia gave him none of that. She simply looked at him with the patience of someone who understood that truth did not need to rush. Ryan glanced around the room, noticing the attention from the customers. He straightened his uniform slightly, as if reminding everyone around him who held the authority in that moment. "I am going to need some identification," he said. His voice was direct, but there was something behind it, a demand rather than a request. Olivia tilted her head slightly. "Officer Whitmore, I would be happy to provide identification if you explain the reason for the request." Again, her tone remained respectful. Again, she asked for something simple. A reason, a process, a conversation based on understanding. But Ryan was not used to being questioned by the people he approached. "Ma'am, this is not a debate," he replied. "I am doing my job." Olivia looked at him for a moment. Doing your job and explaining your actions are not opposites. The words were calm, but they carried a deeper meaning. The kind of meaning that came from years of experience. Ryan did not know that Olivia had sat across from governors, lawmakers, and community leaders. He did not know that she had spent countless hours studying how trust between citizens and institutions could be strengthened. To him, she was simply someone who was not responding the way he wanted. The waitress behind the counter quietly placed a plate on a nearby table, then stepped back. She had noticed the shift in the room. The friendly morning atmosphere had disappeared. Customers who had been laughing moments earlier were now watching carefully. A man near the window whispered to his friend, "Something does not feel right." Ryan continued asking questions, but each one carried the weight of his assumptions. Olivia answered when necessary, but she never allowed the conversation to become disrespectful. She understood something Ryan had forgotten. A person could be powerful and still choose kindness. A person could be challenged and still choose dignity. "Officer," Olivia said softly, "I believe everyone deserves to be treated with fairness before judgment is made." Ryan looked at her, almost surprised by her confidence. He did not know why her calmness bothered him. He only knew that it did. He had dealt with many difficult situations before, but this one felt different. There was something about the way she carried herself. Something about the way she refused to become smaller under pressure. For a brief moment, Ryan wondered if he had misunderstood the situation. But instead of slowing down, he pushed forward. He believed control came from showing certainty. He believed hesitation was weakness. What he did not realize was that the strongest people in the room were often the ones who did not need to prove anything. Olivia reached for her coffee and took a quiet sip. She was not trying to embarrass him. She was not trying to win an argument. She was simply waiting for the truth to reveal itself. And soon, the entire diner would learn that the woman Ryan thought he understood was someone he had never truly seen at all. Ryan Whitmore had spent years believing that confidence was the same as being right. To him, hesitation meant weakness, and questioning his own decisions felt unnecessary. That belief had shaped the way he approached every situation, including the one unfolding inside the small diner on Maple Avenue. But what Ryan did not understand was that confidence without reflection could become a barrier between a person and the truth. Olivia Carter watched him carefully, not with anger, but with awareness. She had seen this pattern before, not just in politics, but in everyday life. A person making a decision about someone before taking the time to truly understand them. She knew that the most difficult moments were often not created by loud arguments. They were created by quiet assumptions that nobody challenged. Ryan reached for the notepad attached to his uniform and began writing down information. "Name?" he asked. Olivia looked at him calmly. "Olivia Carter." He continued writing. "Occupation?" There was a brief pause. Olivia could have answered immediately. She could have ended the situation within seconds by saying exactly who she was. She could have mentioned her position, her experience, and the people who knew her name across the state. But she chose not to. Not because she was hiding, because she wanted to understand. She wanted to see how people were treated when they believed no one important was watching. "I work in public service," she replied. Ryan looked up for a moment. "Public service?" he repeated. The way he said it carried doubt. Olivia noticed. The people around them noticed too. A few customers exchanged uncomfortable looks. They could feel the difference between a conversation and an interrogation. The diner owner, Maya Brooks, stood behind the counter watching quietly. She had known many customers who came through those doors. She had seen people have disagreements, misunderstandings, and difficult conversations. But this felt different. It felt like one person had already decided the other person was wrong before hearing the full story. Ryan looked at Olivia's notebook again. "You were taking notes about this area?" he asked. "I take notes about many communities," Olivia answered. "I believe listening is part of understanding." Ryan gave a small nod, but his expression did not change. "Sometimes people make situations more complicated than they need to be," he said. Olivia looked directly at him. "Sometimes situations become complicated because people stop asking questions." For a moment, Ryan had no immediate response. The statement was simple, but it carried a message he was not expecting. Around the diner, the morning sounds continued. Plates moved across tables. Coffee was poured. The world outside continued as normal. But inside that small restaurant, a deeper question was beginning to appear. What happens when someone with authority forgets that authority is supposed to serve people, not separate them? Ryan still believed he was handling a routine situation. He still believed the woman sitting in front of him was someone he could easily categorize. He did not know that every word spoken, every decision made, and every assumption displayed was becoming part of a story that would soon reach far beyond the walls of the diner. Olivia remained calm because she understood something Ryan had not learned yet. The truth does not need to announce itself. It simply waits for the right moment to be revealed. The atmosphere inside the diner had changed completely. What started as an ordinary morning filled with coffee, conversation, and familiar faces had become a moment where everyone seemed to be waiting for the next decision. Ryan Whitmore stood near Olivia Carter's table, convinced that he was maintaining order. But from the perspective of everyone watching, something else was happening. They were witnessing the difference between authority and understanding. Ryan looked at Olivia's calm expression and felt a growing frustration. He could not understand why she was not reacting the way he expected. Most people became nervous when questioned by an officer. Most people rushed to explain themselves. Most people tried to prove they were not a problem. Olivia did not. She simply remained respectful and composed. "I am going to need you to answer more directly," Ryan said. Olivia looked at him. "I believe I have answered your questions, Officer Whitmore. If there is something specific you need to know, please ask." Her response was reasonable, but Ryan interpreted her confidence as resistance. He had become so accustomed to people accepting his authority that a calm conversation began to feel like a challenge. Near the counter, Maya Brooks continued watching. She knew something was wrong, but she also knew how complicated moments like this could become. She had seen people hesitate to speak when an officer was involved, not because they agreed with what was happening, but because they were unsure what would happen if they stepped forward. That silence filled the diner. It was not approval. It was uncertainty. Olivia noticed it too. She saw the customers looking down at their tables, avoiding eye contact, hoping the situation would resolve itself. She understood that feeling. Throughout her life, she had met countless people who carried stories they were afraid to tell because they believed nobody would listen. That was one of the reasons she entered public service in the first place. She wanted people to believe their voices mattered. Ryan pulled out his radio and briefly looked toward the front window. "I am going to need you to come with me while I sort this out," he said. The words were delivered with certainty, as if the decision had already been finalized. The diner became quiet again. Olivia looked at him for a moment. She understood the seriousness of the moment, but she refused to let fear control her actions. "Officer Whitmore," she said calmly, "before this goes any further, I want you to consider whether you have all the information." Ryan paused. For the first time, something about her words made him hesitate. There was no anger in her voice. No attempt to intimidate him. Only a reminder. A reminder that every situation has another side. But Ryan quickly pushed that thought away. He believed he had seen enough. He believed he understood enough. And that was the mistake that would define the rest of the day. Because the person he thought was powerless was actually someone who had spent years holding powerful people accountable. The person he believed he was questioning was someone who had dedicated her career to making sure others were heard. Olivia slowly stood from her chair, placing her notebook into her bag. She did not move with panic. She did not move with anger. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone who knew that the truth would eventually arrive. Outside the diner, the morning sun continued shining over Maple Avenue. Inside, the next chapter was already beginning, and Ryan Whitmore was about to discover that some encounters are remembered not because of what happened in the moment, but because of what they reveal about the people involved. Olivia Carter placed her notebook inside her bag and slowly stood from the table. The entire diner watched in silence as she prepared to leave with Officer Ryan Whitmore. Nobody knew her real identity. Nobody knew the years of work behind her calm expression. To everyone around them, it looked like a simple misunderstanding between a customer and a police officer. But Olivia knew moments like this were rarely simple. They revealed character. They revealed choices. They revealed what people did when they believed nobody important was paying attention. Ryan walked toward the door, confident that the situation was under control. He moved with the certainty of someone who had never considered that he might be the one making a mistake. Behind him, a few customers exchanged quiet looks. They wanted to say something, but uncertainty held them back. Maya Brooks watched Olivia carefully. She noticed something unusual. Olivia was not acting like someone who felt defeated. She was acting like someone who understood that this moment was part of something bigger. "Are you sure this is necessary?" Maya finally asked. Her voice was polite, but there was concern behind it. Ryan turned slightly. "Ma'am, I am handling the situation." It was a familiar response. A response designed to end questions rather than answer them. Maya lowered her eyes, but she did not walk away. She knew that sometimes simply witnessing something mattered. Olivia looked at her and offered a small, reassuring smile. It was not a smile of happiness. It was a reminder that she was not afraid. Outside the diner, the morning air was cool, and the sounds of the city continued around them. Cars moved down Maple Avenue. People walked toward their jobs. Nobody passing by knew that a quiet moment inside a neighborhood restaurant was about to become a turning point. Ryan continued asking Olivia questions as they walked. His tone remained professional, but his assumptions were still clear. He asked where she lived, what she was doing in the area, and why she had been taking notes. Olivia answered each question calmly. She did not give him a reason to escalate the situation. She did not provide the reaction he seemed to expect. Instead, she continued doing what she had always done. She listened. She observed. She remembered. Ryan noticed that she remained composed, and it unsettled him. He had expected the situation to become emotional. He had expected her confidence to disappear once the pressure increased. But Olivia's strength was not based on the approval of others. It came from knowing her own truth. While they stood outside the diner, Detective Ethan Cole arrived nearby after hearing about the situation through a routine communication. Ethan had worked with Ryan before. He knew Ryan was experienced, but he had also noticed a pattern over time. Ryan was quick to judge and slow to reconsider. Ethan looked toward the diner, then toward Olivia. Something about the scene did not feel right. He noticed the customers watching through the windows. He noticed Maya, standing near the entrance with a concerned expression. He noticed Olivia's calmness, and he started asking himself a question that Ryan had not asked. What if this was not the situation it appeared to be? Inside the diner, Maya quietly picked up her phone, not to create a scene, not to cause trouble, but because she believed important moments should not disappear unnoticed. Every detail mattered. Every choice mattered. Every word mattered. Ryan still believed he was managing a routine encounter. He did not realize that the truth was already moving around him. He did not realize that people were beginning to look closer. And he certainly did not realize that the woman he thought he was questioning was about to become the person who would question everything about him. The city continued moving around them, unaware that a quiet moment inside a neighborhood diner was slowly becoming something much bigger. Outside the restaurant, Olivia Carter stood calmly, while Officer Ryan Whitmore continued following what he believed was a routine procedure. But across the street, Detective Ethan Cole watched carefully. He had learned throughout his career that situations were not always defined by the first impression. Sometimes the truth was hidden in the details people ignored. Ethan looked through the diner windows and noticed the expressions of the customers inside. They were not looking at Olivia like someone causing trouble. They were looking at her like someone being misunderstood. That difference caught his attention. Ryan noticed Ethan approaching and gave a small nod. "Everything is under control," Ryan said confidently. Ethan looked toward Olivia, then back at Ryan. "What happened?" he asked. Ryan quickly explained his version of events. He described Olivia as uncooperative and suspicious, but Ethan noticed something missing. There were no specific details. No clear explanation. Just conclusions. Ethan had worked beside Ryan long enough to recognize that pattern. Ryan often trusted his first impression more than the facts in front of him. "Did you verify everything?" Ethan asked. Ryan paused briefly. "I know what I saw." Ethan did not respond immediately. He simply looked at him. Those words sounded familiar. Too familiar. Because knowing what you saw and understanding what you saw were not always the same thing. Inside the diner, Maya Brooks stood near the counter, holding her phone quietly. She had not recorded to create conflict. She had recorded because she believed accountability mattered. She remembered the exact moment when the atmosphere changed. She remembered Olivia's calm voice. She remembered Ryan's certainty. She knew that small moments could reveal important truths. Meanwhile, Olivia remained patient. She noticed Ethan's thoughtful expression and understood that he was beginning to ask the right questions. She did not try to explain who she was. She did not use her position as a shortcut. She wanted people to see the situation clearly without needing a title attached to her name. That was something she had always believed. Respect should not depend on status. A person's dignity should not become visible only after someone discovers their importance. Ryan looked between Olivia and Ethan, sensing that the conversation was changing. For the first time that morning, he felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. It was not because anyone had challenged his authority. It was because people were beginning to look deeper. The simple certainty he had carried into the diner was starting to weaken. At the station, a routine report was being prepared. Names were being entered. Details were being documented. But small questions were beginning to appear. Why had the situation started? What evidence supported the decision? Were all procedures followed correctly? Questions that seemed insignificant at first were slowly creating a bigger picture. Olivia looked toward the diner one more time. She saw Maya still, standing inside. She saw the customers who had witnessed everything. She knew their memories of that morning mattered. Because justice was not only about what happened. It was also about who was willing to speak when something did not feel right. Ryan still believed the situation would disappear like countless others before it. He believed his explanation would be accepted without challenge. But he did not know that this time, the details had been noticed. The moment had been witnessed. And the truth he never expected to face had already started moving closer. Ryan Whitmore sat at his desk later that morning, looking over the report he had written about the encounter at the diner. To him, it was another situation added to a long list of daily responsibilities. He believed the matter would be finished quickly, filed away, and forgotten. That belief came from years of experiencing the system working exactly the way he expected. When he made a decision, people usually accepted it. When he explained his actions, few people questioned them. But this time was different. This time, people had paid attention. In the corner of the station, Detective Ethan Cole reviewed the details from the diner. He was not searching for a reason to criticize Ryan. He was searching for the truth. That was the difference between a reaction and an investigation. Ethan looked at the information in front of him and noticed several things that did not add up. The report described Olivia as difficult to cooperate with, but the witnesses described something completely different. The customers remembered a calm conversation. The diner owner remembered a respectful exchange. The details told a story that did not match the one written in the report. Ethan leaned back in his chair and thought about how easily assumptions could become accepted as facts. He had seen it before. A person could be judged by a first impression, and once that judgment was made, every action afterward was interpreted through that belief. Meanwhile, Olivia Carter had returned to her schedule for the day. She continued meeting with community members, listening to concerns, and doing the work she had always done. She did not immediately announce what happened. She did not call attention to herself. She simply waited. Because Olivia understood that real change was not created by a single emotional moment. It was created by evidence, honesty, and accountability. At the diner, Maya Brooks continued thinking about what she had witnessed. She remembered Olivia's calm voice. She remembered the way she carried herself. She remembered the feeling that something important had happened in that small restaurant. After some consideration, Maya decided to share the information she had documented with the proper authorities. She did not do it out of anger. She did it because she believed every person deserved to have their side heard. Back at the station, Ryan noticed the atmosphere around him changing. A few coworkers who usually greeted him casually seemed more serious. Questions were beginning to circulate. Not accusations. Questions. And questions were something Ryan was not used to facing. He walked past the office hallway and saw Ethan reviewing the information. "Everything okay?" Ryan asked. Ethan looked up. "I am just making sure we have the full picture." Those words stayed with Ryan. The full picture. He had always believed he saw the full picture quickly, but maybe he had only been seeing one part of it. For the first time, the possibility entered his mind that the situation might not have been as simple as he thought. Still, pride made it difficult to admit. He had built his identity around being certain, around being the person who knew what to do. But certainty without reflection could lead someone in the wrong direction. Hours passed, and more information began to surface. The diner footage was reviewed. Witness accounts were compared. The quiet details that Ryan had overlooked started becoming impossible to ignore. The truth was no longer hidden in a single person's memory. It was becoming a clear picture built from many voices. And somewhere inside the station, a question began to spread. Who was the woman Ryan Whitmore had questioned that morning? And why had he never asked before, assuming he already knew the answer? The truth had started moving faster than Ryan Whitmore expected. What he believed would disappear as a simple report was now becoming a conversation throughout the department. Not because people were looking for a reason to judge him, but because more people were asking the questions that should have been asked from the beginning. In a small conference room at the station, Detective Ethan Cole sat with several documents spread across the table. The diner footage, witness statements, and official records all told the same story. The situation had not been handled with the care expected from someone carrying public responsibility. Ethan looked through the information quietly, understanding that every document represented more than paperwork. It represented a moment when someone decided whether to listen or assume. Across the room, Ryan entered with the same confidence he had carried earlier that morning. He expected a simple conversation. He expected an explanation to be enough. But when he saw the seriousness on everyone's faces, he realized this was different. "What is going on?" Ryan asked. Ethan looked at him calmly. "We are reviewing the encounter from the diner." Ryan crossed his arms. "I already explained what happened." Ethan nodded. "Yes, you explained what you believed happened. Now we are looking at what actually happened." The difference between those two statements was difficult for Ryan to accept. For years, he had trusted his instincts. He believed experience gave him the ability to understand situations quickly. But now he was being asked to slow down and look closer, something he had rarely done. Meanwhile, Olivia Carter continued her work at the state office. Her morning meeting schedule was already filled with discussions about community programs and public concerns. Her staff knew something had happened, but Olivia had asked them not to turn the situation into a personal battle. She believed the focus should remain on accountability, not attention. "The goal is not to embarrass anyone," she told her team. "The goal is to make sure every person is treated fairly." Those words reflected who Olivia had always been. She had not entered public service because she wanted recognition. She entered because she believed systems could improve when people were willing to confront difficult truths. Back at the station, Ryan received another update. The review was expanding. More supervisors were becoming involved. More questions were being asked. He looked at the information in front of him and began realizing something uncomfortable. The person he had considered a problem was never the problem. The real issue was how quickly he had decided he already knew the answer. Later that afternoon, Ethan found additional information connected to Olivia's identity. He paused when he saw the confirmation. The woman from the diner was not simply a community member. She was Senator Olivia Carter, one of the most respected voices in the state government. The room became quiet as the information was shared. Everyone understood the significance of that discovery. But Ethan focused on something else. He understood that Olivia's position should not be the reason the situation mattered. The situation mattered because every person deserved the same respect, whether they were a senator, a worker, a student, or anyone else. Ryan looked at the screen showing Olivia's official profile. For the first time, he saw the complete picture. He saw the person behind the assumptions. He saw the leader behind the quiet woman sitting in a diner. And he realized the most important detail of all. If he had never learned her title, would he have treated her the same way? That question stayed with him. Because sometimes the greatest lessons come when people finally see what they refused to see before. And Ryan Whitmore was about to face the truth that had been waiting in front of him all along. The room became silent when Ryan Whitmore finally understood who Olivia Carter really was. The name on the screen was not just another profile in a database. It represented years of public service, difficult decisions, and a commitment to protecting the voices of people who often felt unheard. Ryan stared at the information in front of him, and for the first time that day, he did not see a situation to control. He saw a person he had never taken the time to understand. Detective Ethan Cole watched Ryan carefully. He did not see anger in Ryan's expression. He saw something else. Realization. The uncomfortable moment when someone begins to recognize that their own choices created the problem they were trying to solve. Her position does not change what happened, Ethan said quietly. It only shows how easily people can be judged when nobody knows their background. Those words stayed in the room, because that was the truth everyone needed to face. If Olivia had been an ordinary customer with no title, no influence, and no public recognition, would the situation have received the same attention? Would people have asked the same questions? Would anyone have stopped to listen? Olivia returned to the station later that afternoon, not surrounded by cameras or making a public statement. She arrived with the same calm presence she had shown in the diner. She did not come to demand special treatment. She came because accountability mattered. When she entered the meeting room, Ryan stood quietly. The confidence he had carried earlier was gone. In its place was uncertainty. He had spent years believing that authority meant having the final word. Now he was learning that responsibility meant being willing to hear difficult words. Olivia looked at him and spoke calmly. Officer Whitmore, this moment is not important because of who I am. It is important because of what happened. Ryan listened without interrupting. A system cannot earn trust if people believe they are judged before they are heard. The message was not about revenge. It was not about destroying someone's career. It was about understanding the impact of decisions made too quickly. Ryan looked down for a moment. He remembered the diner, the questions he asked, the assumptions he made, the way Olivia remained respectful even when she had every reason to feel frustrated. He realized something that was difficult to admit. The person who showed the most control in that situation was not the person wearing the badge. It was the person who never needed to prove her worth. Later that evening, Governor Daniel Reeves received the official review. He had been informed about the situation because it represented a larger concern about public trust. When he called the department, his message was clear. Leadership was not about protecting individuals from consequences. Leadership was about protecting the principles everyone depended on. The call was brief, but its meaning was powerful. Actions mattered. Decisions mattered. The responsibility that came with authority mattered. Ryan listened as the reality of the situation became impossible to ignore. The badge he valued so much had never been the source of true respect. Respect came from how a person used that badge. For the first time, he understood that power was not measured by how many people had to listen to you. It was measured by whether you were willing to listen to others. And as the investigation moved forward, Ryan Whitmore faced the moment every person eventually faces when their assumptions are challenged. The moment when they must decide whether to defend who they were or learn from who they could become. The days that followed changed the way Ryan Whitmore looked at his own decisions. For years, he had measured his success by how quickly he could handle situations, how confidently he could respond, and how often people accepted his judgment without question. But now, sitting in the middle of an investigation, he began to understand something he had ignored for too long. Speed was not the same as wisdom. Confidence was not the same as being correct. And authority was not something that removed the responsibility to listen. The review continued with careful attention to every detail. The diner footage showed what happened from the beginning. The witness statements showed what people experienced in that moment. Nothing was hidden. Nothing was exaggerated. It was simply a complete picture of an encounter that had been viewed too quickly through assumptions. Detective Ethan Cole continued working through the information, not because he wanted Ryan to fail, but because he believed the purpose of accountability was improvement. A system could only become stronger when people were willing to recognize where it needed to do better. Ryan sat quietly during the final review meeting. He listened as each detail was explained. He heard the difference between what he thought he saw and what others actually experienced. That difference was difficult to accept, but he knew he could not ignore it anymore. Olivia Carter attended the meeting as well. She did not arrive with anger. She did not arrive looking for a personal victory. She arrived with the same calm confidence she had shown from the beginning. Every person deserves to be treated with fairness before their story is known, Olivia said. That principle should not depend on a person's title, position, or background. Her words carried through the room because they were not only about one encounter. They were about something much larger. The trust between communities and the people responsible for serving them. Ryan looked toward Olivia and finally understood why she had remained calm. He had mistaken her patience for weakness. He had mistaken silence for surrender. But he had been wrong. Her calmness came from knowing that truth did not need anger to become powerful. It only needed time and honesty. Later that week, Governor Daniel Reeves addressed the situation with department leadership. His decision was not based on personal connections or political pressure. It was based on responsibility. A public position required accountability, and a badge represented a promise to serve every person fairly. Ryan was informed that he would face official consequences for his actions and would no longer continue in the same role without addressing the concerns raised by the review. The moment was difficult for him. Losing the trust he once assumed he had was painful, but it also became a moment of reflection. He thought about the diner, the quiet customers, Maya Brooks standing behind the counter, Olivia sitting peacefully with her coffee. The person he believed needed to prove herself had been the person who showed the most patience. Ryan realized that the greatest lesson was not about losing authority. It was about understanding what authority was supposed to mean. A uniform could create recognition, but character created respect. A position could create attention, but integrity created trust. As the city moved forward, the story of that morning continued to be discussed, not because of a single person, but because it reminded people of something important. Justice was not only found in courtrooms or government offices. Sometimes, it began with a simple choice. The choice to listen before judging. The choice to understand before assuming. The choice to remember that behind every person is a story worth hearing. Weeks after the morning at the diner, the city had moved on to new headlines, new conversations, and new challenges. But for the people who witnessed what happened that day, the memory remained. Not because of a single confrontation, but because of the lesson hidden inside it. A quiet moment had revealed something powerful about assumptions, responsibility, and the meaning of true justice. Olivia Carter returned to her work with the same dedication she had always shown. She continued meeting with communities, listening to concerns, and searching for ways to build stronger connections between people and the institutions meant to serve them. She never viewed the experience as a personal victory. To her, the purpose was never about proving that she was important. The purpose was proving that every person was important. In a public discussion several weeks later, Olivia spoke about trust and leadership. She did not mention Ryan Whitmore by name. She did not focus on one individual. Instead, she focused on the larger message. A fair society is built when people are willing to see each other before they judge each other, she said. The moment we stop listening is the moment we stop understanding. Those words reached many people because they reflected something everyone could recognize. Everyone has experienced being misunderstood. Everyone has experienced a moment when someone made a decision about them without knowing their full story. The difference was what people chose to do after that moment. Ryan Whitmore had changed as well. The consequences of his actions remained, but so did the opportunity to learn. He spent time reflecting on the habits and assumptions that had shaped the way he approached people. He realized that improvement did not begin by defending every decision he had made. It began by accepting that some decisions needed to be questioned. Detective Ethan Cole noticed that change. He saw a person who was no longer trying to prove he had been right. He saw someone trying to understand why he had been wrong. That difference mattered, because accountability was not only about consequences. It was also about growth. Maya Brooks continued running the diner on Maple Avenue. The same tables remained near the windows. The same coffee cups filled the mornings. The same customers returned for their usual conversations. But for Maya, that place would always represent something more. It reminded her that ordinary people could make a difference simply by paying attention, by remembering what they saw, by refusing to let important moments disappear. The story of Olivia Carter and Ryan Whitmore became a reminder that justice does not always arrive with noise. Sometimes it arrives through patience. Sometimes it arrives through evidence. Sometimes it arrives when someone quietly decides that the truth deserves to be heard. Ryan once believed that wearing a badge gave him control over every situation. But he learned that a badge was never meant to create distance between people. It was meant to create responsibility toward them. Olivia never needed to announce her power because she carried something stronger. She carried integrity. And that was the lesson everyone remembered. A person's value should never depend on whether the world recognizes their title. Respect should never be reserved only for those with influence. Because the moment we choose to see people for who they truly are, rather than what we assume they are, that is the moment justice begins. He thought authority came from being the loudest voice in the room. But in the end, he learned that the quietest voice, when carrying truth, could change everything.